So what did we learn from SEC Media Days?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson from the HSA Radio Network. That's me. And Jimmy Stein from Bama Online. That's him. Jimmy, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and we want to thank our everydayers for being here every day. We also want to thank all you newbies that have just been joining in as football season is beginning to come into blossom, and people are beginning to get back into it. Want to thank all you guys. Football is footballing right now. And SEC Media Days just happened. And, Jimmy, first of all, let me just ask you, did you learn anything new from these SEC Media Days? And then I'm going to read you a quote from Philip Marshall, who is an Auburn beat writer or reporter or journalist or whatever he is, a columnist. I don't even know anymore. But he used to write for the Huntsville Times, I think. And he now works for 24/7. He had an interesting comment, and I just don't understand it, but I have a comment on it myself.
Well, I learned a lot from Media Days. I've watched a ton of the coverage, if not virtually all of it. And it's not just learning from Media Days. For me, it's getting interested in all the SEC teams and sort of while I'm watching Media Days, pour into the other teams' depth charts, talk about those teams. It's really, for me, a 4-day study of everything in the league and making some initial serious predictions about how I think the league is going to go this year, how I feel about the different teams. And really my takeaway, not so much what I learned at Media Days, but all that I've learned from Media Days and how it shapes my view of the league this year. And it ends up, I've sort of cut the league into 3 different tiers of teams that I expect to contend for the SEC championship and a playoff spot. Kind of a middle tier of teams that are very good, because the middle of the SEC is always very tough, especially if you go on the road and play those teams in their place. And then sort of a bottom. And I do think the league does have a bottom. They're not terrible teams, but I don't think there'll be teams that can compete with the mid-tier and the upper tier of the SEC. So I have the league in 3 definitive tiers. No worries, Alabama fans. Alabama's in the top tier, but along with 5 other schools that I see as top tier playoff contenders. So I see an extremely competitive year in the SEC with, and this will be fun, Luke. Not that this is new, not that it's news, not that it's a news flash, but I think there's going to be a ton of close games and a ton of games that come down to the final minute. A lot of classics, I think, this year, because teams are so evenly matched. When I said top tier, I think there's 6 teams. I think of those 6 teams, anybody can beat anybody. And those mid-tier games, hey, even if you're a top-tier team, you go on the road to teams that I have in the mid-tier, like LSU, A&M, Oklahoma. You go on the road to those places, you better lace them up. And even the bottom-tier teams, don't think you're going to beat anybody 50-0. Maybe Vanderbilt, but you're not going to. I mean, I have Mississippi State second to the bottom. I mean, that's not a terrible football team. For instance, they play Arizona State. One of the first couple games of the year, they may beat that Power 4 team out on the road, even though they fly out to Tempe.
Yeah, I don't want you to ruin any of your predictions. We're doing that in the next segment.
Sure.
But I think another thing about the SEC this year, and you're right, I think there are going to be a lot of last-second games because they're setting it up this way, because we're going to have a 2-minute warning now, because we're going more NFL-ish. And what do you see in the NFL? A lot. You see a lot of 3-point, 4-point games. And look, that's great in a sense. And I know a lot of people enjoy that. I mean, I love the drama too. I say this all the time about the NCAA basketball tournament. I love the drama. I mean, call me TNT. I love drama. But it's not necessarily the best way to determine a champion. That's right. My only argument. But one other thing I wanted to talk about, and this doesn't necessarily relate directly to SEC Media Days because it is somebody else's thoughts about SEC Media Days, and my thoughts are on this. I want to read you something Philip Marshall said that is very bothersome to me.
Yeah.
And this is a quote.
I haven't heard it
football
yet, but I know it's bothered you. This is the 17th time I've heard that this has bothered Luke today. I know y'all are just getting on the show. This is thrown all over my pal here.
College football is in a dangerous place. So much attention and so much focus on a handful of teams that it makes life considerably more difficult for other teams. Unfortunately, it's not going to change. Those left out of greatness conversation have but one choice: force their way in by winning and doing it repeatedly. That's easy to say, and it's hard to do. They can do nothing about the blessed ones staying in the conversation, even when they aren't successful in dominating it when they are. That sentence makes no sense. It's hard under any circumstance, but it's much harder when fans, recruits, and everyone else is inundated with another kind of message. It is even harder. Now, let me just say this. So what he's saying is that college football isn't fair in terms of, it isn't equitable in terms of its treatment of teams. Exactly. That's called life. And see, to call Alabama and Ohio State and LSU and Georgia and I guess we want to throw USC and Notre Dame and Michigan, the blessed ones, is to totally overlook the fact that since the beginning of college football, most of those teams I just mentioned have carried college football. Now, you can say, well, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. But I would also argue this, that they aren't so much blessed. Maybe Alabama and Ohio State and USC and Notre Dame have a much better marketing team than these other teams he's talking about. I'm sure he is implying that Auburn's in that group. But you know what? Let me say this, and this is no shot at Auburn. These are just facts. Auburn's had 3 straight losing seasons. Is that right? I think that's correct.
I think that's right.
Or at the very least, they're batting 500. I don't want to even look it up. So why should people be talking about them? Now, let me also say this. Back when Alabama was wallowing in its own self-crapulence, to steal a quote from The Simpsons, one of the reasons that Alabama was still in the news was because they got hammered by the NCAA, and people loved to point their finger and, like Nelson Muntz, go, ha, ha. So that's why we were in the news. We weren't getting positive press back then. We were getting negative press over and over and over again. And then, yes, in 2005, Sports Illustrated put us on the cover, said Bama is back. And we were back until the best player in the country at that time in 2005, Tyrone Prothro, was hurt. And all of a sudden, we weren't the same team anymore. And injuries are part of the game. I'm not crying about it. I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you, again, the way it is. It is so bothersome to me that he just puts it out there like, hey, we should talk about West Virginia as much as we talk about Ohio State. That's never going to happen. And it's not because people don't respect West Virginia. It's because Ohio State is a much bigger brand. They carry much more weight, and they always will. West Virginia went to a national championship game in 1988 and played Notre Dame with Major Harris, and I loved that team. And I remember that team, and I'm not a West Virginia fan, and I remember the quarterback. I remember the game. But West Virginia hadn't peed much of a drop since then. Now, they've been pretty good, but they hadn't been very good. And Ohio State has continuously won. Here's my other thing. How often does Ohio State or Alabama or any of these teams, Michigan, I know Michigan lost to Appalachian State very famously in the mid-2000s. Alabama lost to La Monroe in 2007. I'm sure Ohio State has an upset in there somewhere. But when's the last time one of those teams lost, was really, really upset? I mean, I guess Alabama was upset at A&M with Zach, what's his name?
They were still pretty good.
They were pretty good, and that I mean, how many teams would have walked into that environment? It wasn't like we lost at home to New Mexico State badly. No. So, again, I just find it so insulting to the teams that have worked so hard. It's like when people hate on billionaires. I understand it. People look at billionaires and they're like, you think you're better than me. I do. I do that too. There are most of you people listening have more money than I do. So, but it's easy to go, you just don't understand. You're blessed. You got it all freebie and whatever. And you overlook the fact that, hey, no, Mark Cuban had to do a lot of work. Those other dudes on Shark Tanks Shark Tanks. I guess, is there multiple Shark Tanks? Shark Tank had to work their tails off to get their money. And we always just act like Jimmy Rain, pretty good dude, met him several times, big Auburn guy. Let me tell you something. He didn't just sit on his tuchus. That man worked his tail off. So it's not who am I to say, you don't understand, you're just blessed. No, he's smart and he worked. And Alabama worked and Ohio State worked. It doesn't mean Auburn didn't work, but it means maybe Alabama did a little more. Maybe their marketing's better. Maybe a lot of things.
It's not like Alabama hasn't won all these games. I mean,
exactly.
Alabama won 6 national titles in 12 years. I mean, how are you gonna diminish that? I mean, 6 national titles in 12 seasons very recently. And I don't know, that whole quote to me just kind of sounded like someone complaining that the president's name is in the paper every day. I don't understand why the president of the United States name's in the paper every day when I'm opening doors for ladies. I'm polite to people. I'm a good person. My name's not in the paper. I don't understand why the president's name is.
I just don't get the vitriol because Alabama and Ohio State and Texas get a bunch of love when of course they do. Of course they do.
It's the winning. I mean,
it's the winning. And not only that,
and winning consistently, which Auburn hasn't done in a while. And it's been a while since now they've won the national title in 2010. They played for it in 2013. That's great, but they haven't done a ton since. They've been occasionally good. They've certainly beaten Alabama and Jordan Hare a few times. They've done that, and they've got some wins here and there, but they've just got to play better. And to me, it starts with quarterback. Today is Auburn Day as we record this on Thursday. I'm looking forward to hearing about Auburn.
Me too. Now we
got what they've done in the portal, and I want to learn more about them, but I don't think they're great at quarterback again. And hey, look, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Carson Beck, a lot of good quarterbacks in this league, and I don't think Auburn's got a quarterback that can compare with the better quarterbacks in the SEC.
All right. Well, Jimmy, we're going to talk about where we think these teams will finish before the SEC media predictions. Right now, though, I want to tell you about FanDuel. They're the best. They've always been the best. And if I can ever find my live read, I'm going to tell you about them. I think I'm going to find it here in just a second. And I did right here with FanDuel.
There it is.
That was terrible. I'm going to get an email. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want them to. That's awesome. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers. I'm talking about all y'all with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Definitely go check out Locked On Sports today. And I'm going to give my boy Zach Blackerby over at Locked On Auburn a shout out. I doubt he tackles what Philip Marshall said, but he could. I would love to get on his show and discuss it with him because I'm hoping he understands where I'm coming from this. This isn't an insult at Auburn. I just look at it like, hey, it's like RC Cola saying, well, why don't people talk about us like they do Coca-Cola?
Hey, if Auburn wins 10 or 12 games this year, I can promise Auburn, y'all are going to be talked about a lot. Win the games. Win the games. You'll be talked about a lot.
Yeah. I just wish somebody would show the kick six highlight again. That never happens, except every other 5 seconds on every show.
How about a new highlight of a new big win over a top 5 team? To me, it's just win the games. You're going to be talked about. There's been a ton of talk this week at Media Days about Missouri and Ole Miss. They're not traditionally talked about, but guess what? They're winning.
That's right. So they'll get it. All right. So, Jimmy, our predictions. These are just some predictions we're going to make before the actual predictions come out. By the time you see this, the predictions may be out. It doesn't matter. I'm going to let you go first. You had a very interesting text. You didn't spill the beans because you didn't tell me who you think is going to meet for the title. But I think it's a very confusing prediction you have.
It is. I have 3 predictions. Doesn't that sound like a lawyer thing to do? I have 3 predictions. I have a half series prediction, which means I think this could happen. I'm not predicting it, but I think it could, and we should consider it. And then I'll have my real series prediction, which is, okay, you can go to the bank with this. And then I have my wild guess as to who the 2 teams will be in Atlanta. So my half series prediction, which is the fun one, and I seriously played around with schedules and looked at a deeper dive into the league. And I do think it's realistic. And how fun will this be? That there could be a 6-team tie for first place in the SEC. 6 teams at 6-2. Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri, and Tennessee. Now, some would say, Jimmy, there's just no way. I don't even know mathematically that could happen. But, oh, yeah, it could happen. And this is one of the main reasons in my mind it could happen. Now, I think Texas, Georgia, and Alabama are the 3 best teams. That's what I believe. But I also think Texas, Georgia, and Alabama play the 3 toughest schedules, and there's going to be losses based on those schedules. I think Ole Miss, Missouri, and Tennessee have doable schedules. I don't think they're quite as good as those first 3, but you know what? They have schedules that they could get to 6-2. And then when everybody's at 6-2, there's going to be some convoluted tiebreakers. My understanding is that the tiebreakers haven't even really been figured out yet. I don't know what the tiebreakers are. I don't know what they will be. If there's a 6-way tie for first place, all I'm going to say is, well, I don't care whether Alabama's in Atlanta, but you damn sure better put Alabama in the playoff. And I think Alabama would be in the playoff, of course, at 6-2 and 10-2 overall. But yeah, that's my half serious prediction, is a 6-way tie for first place between those 6 teams. And I don't rule that out at all. Now, for a serious prediction in terms of, okay, well, I want something I can take to the bank. Well, here's a watered down version of that. My serious prediction is there will be a tie. A tiebreakers will be used to determine who gets to Atlanta. I'm convinced of that, whether maybe a team is in first place all by themselves and there's a tie for the second place spot, or maybe there's multiple teams tied for first place. But I think there will be a tiebreaker utilized to get teams to Atlanta. Now, who will those teams be? A little bit of a flyer. I already told you who my top 6 are. I'm going to say for right now, I'm confident in the Texas pick. I think Texas has the best 22. The best starting 22 in this league, I think, is Texas and not Alabama, although I think Alabama is very, very close. But I think Texas has the best. I'm going to put Texas in Atlanta, and then I'm going to say the winner of the Georgia-Alabama game will get the other spot. Whoever wins in that game, Georgia at Alabama, I'm going to say Alabama because Alabama's playing at home. So I'm going to have Texas and Alabama in the SEC championship game. But if Georgia beats Alabama in September 28th, then I'm going to say it's a Texas-Georgia rematch because they do play in Austin. So that's
right.
That's how I feel about it.
You made me mad because I'm picking the exact same SEC title game, and I'm picking it for a lot of reasons. Let me say this. My first inclination was to pick Bama Ole Miss. Now, yes, am I being a bit of a homer here? Probably. But I believe that Alabama beats Georgia in Tuscaloosa. I believe that in my heart right now. I believe that's just going to be a crazy environment. And Alabama's had a good run against Georgia. Now, maybe it changes with Kalen DeBoer and no Nick Saban or whatever, but I'm picking Alabama to win that game. So, therefore, I think Alabama have a leg up. I think Alabama also beats Missouri at home. I think that's homecoming too, isn't it, Jimmy?
It is. It is. 11 a.m. Okay.
Now, where Alabama will need to be careful then, of course, is, they're going to have to win at LSU.
South Carolina's homecoming. Is that right?
Okay.
South Carolina.
Regardless, Alabama at LSU, at Oklahoma, at Tennessee, they're going to have to win at least 2 of those 3, and I certainly think they can win all 3. But I'm going to believe Alabama wins 2 of those. So, and therefore, I think Alabama will make it. I'm also going to put Texas there because I think Texas got the long end of the stick. It's not the saying, it's opposite of the saying, but that's okay. In the sense that their schedule, they get to play Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. Oklahoma gets none of those. That's kind of BS, and they should have figured out something about that.
Oklahoma has a tougher schedule between the
Regardless,
two. No question.
And I was going to put Ole Miss over Texas, and let me tell you why I didn't. First of all, so they don't play each other, obviously. Now, Ole Miss doesn't play Alabama either. But I was going to put Ole Miss in there, but then I looked at their schedule again, and we've all been talking about how easy Ole Miss's schedule is. It is easy. right? But they have a stretch in there. And let's also remember, Ole Miss has never been to the SEC title game before.
Right.
So it's like, how can I I don't feel good enough going out on that limb right now. And I look at
toughest
their
year to
schedule.
ever do it too. Harder than ever to do it. And so it's
And
a
I look
stretch.
at their schedule, and here's their run, like in the middle of the year at South Carolina, at LSU, they're at Arkansas, and Ole Miss's last win in Fayetteville was 2008. Now they won in Little Rock like in 18 or something, but they don't fare very well in Fayetteville. In fact, last time, a couple of times ago, they just got shellacked. Like Arkansas took it to them. Then they welcome in Georgia, and then they go to Florida. So they have the stretch of at Arkansas, Georgia at home, at Florida. Now I know Florida people are down on them right now. I get it, and I know why. But I'm saying that's a tough stretch, especially for an Ole Miss team. And I'm going to go back to so in the same Philip Marshall vein here. See, it's hard for me to pick Ole Miss when they've never done it before. So, say I'm being unfair to them, say whatever. But I think that's a very fair thing to say. Like, you've got to show me you can do it before I'm going to tell you can. Before I'm going to predict you can.
I agree totally. I'm hesitant to pick Ole Miss for that very reason. It's not that I don't believe in their starting 22.
Sure.
But I'm a little more show me on Ole Miss, who hasn't had that sort of success.
And then one other just cool reason to pick Alabama, Texas. I mean, they've played the last 2 years. They split on the road. Makes total sense in a fate sort of way, destined sort of way, that they play on a neutral field. Let's determine this thing once and for all. You've got Texas native quarterbacking Alabama. You've got Kalen DeBoer facing off against Steve Sarkisian in a rematch of last year's semifinal game. Just a lot to love about that. I think it makes a ton of sense. Now, I also say this, that if your prediction is right, and that if you have all these teams going, what would it be, 6-2?
6-2.
I want to be the team that says, hey, I volunteer to back out of the SEC championship game.
Yeah, you can argue that playing if there's a 6-team tie, there's an argument to be made that it's an advantage to not play in Atlanta and risk and because if you lose, you're probably not. It's for a whole nother show, but I'm starting to believe the idea there will be what amounts to an unwritten rule that if you lose in your conference championship game, the committee's not going to allow that to be a factor in knocking you out. You won't play in that championship game and get knocked out of the playoff, because that seems so probable from where we sit right now. And it also doesn't seem fair that while everyone else is sitting at home, I'm playing an extra game against an elite team and that can knock me out.
Well, listen, we're going to talk about Tim Keenan on your countdown here next when we come back. If you had asked me a few weeks ago who would be going to SEC Media Days, I certainly would have said Jalen Milroe. I certainly would have said Tyler Booker. And Malachi Moore also makes a ton of sense. In fact, he's sort of leader of the defense. But if you had told me that Tim Keenan's on that list, I bet you if you were like ranking who's going, he might have been number 4. This is a guy who's kind of gumptastic. Big, hadn't exactly set the world on fire, but been incredibly solid. He's got a Josh Chapman-esque vibe about him in terms of production. Josh Chapman could bench press a semi-truck, but and Tim Keenan is sort of that big, maybe not he's not that strong. Nobody's as strong as Josh Chapman was. But Homelander by the way, go check out The Boys. It's just awesome. If y'all haven't been watching The Boys, I don't know what to tell you. Homelander's not as strong as Josh Chapman. But Tim Keenan's a guy I really like from Ramsey. Very excited about his new year coming up, and I think he's going to make an impact. I don't think he's going to be an all-SEC guy, but I think he's going to be very solid.
Yeah, it's hard for nose guards to put up the kind of statistical production it takes to make all-SEC. So I don't know that we'll see that out of Tim Keenan, but what I do think we'll see is some really solid play. When I think of Keenan and who ranks 14th on my roster ranking of the best players on the 2024 football team, I have Tim at 14, which is really high ranking. He redshirted primarily due to, he had a really bad injury his senior year of high school, tore up his knee at Ramsey, and that kind of forced that red shirt. And then what happens in that red shirt year when you're recovering from injury, particularly when you're already 300 pounds, you sort of blow up, right? I mean, Tim got really heavy during that period of time when he couldn't work out, when he was rehabbing that knee injury. So his redshirt freshman year, which was 2022, he only got in 2 games, and it was garbage time against, the 2 teams Alabama would beat 60-0. I mean, Tim played no snaps of consequence in his redshirt freshman year at all. So really he had played 2 seasons and not done anything. And then went from there to being Alabama's starting nose guard in the opener against Middle Tennessee. He won the starting spot from nowhere, just a total underdog, back of the pack. The guy you'd rank last in the defensive line room soared up the depth chart over spring and fall, won the starting spot, and then played well all year long. It was, in Saban's 2-gap scheme, the nose guard is just responsible for the A gap on either side of the center. Tim just played that role perfectly, really controlled the run game between the guards. Good player, great kid, leader on the team, as Luke pointed out, turned his life around, lost a lot of weight, really got serious about his Christianity, which is a big story Tim would like to be told about him. What a great kid, what a great leader, and he's turned into a heck of a football player. I'm going to say more solid than spectacular, but hey, you want a good defense, be solid at nose guard, and Alabama is absolutely solid at nose guard with Tim Keenan on the field.
Yeah, I believe you. I'm right there with you. I think he's maybe a little undervalued by the fan base, by the SEC.
He's not Terrence Cody.
No,
but if there's tiers, he's just behind him. I don't think there's a gigantic gap between Cody and Keenan. I think Keenan will play in the NFL. It's just, his biggest problem in the NFL is he's going to be viewed as, okay, this is an interior run stuffer, and the NFL is less interested in those guys than they are in interior pass rushers, and that's what's going to hurt Keenan come draft time. But is he good enough to be a pro football player? Absolutely. You take Tim Keenan and 15 years ago and the way they used to play in the NFL, this guy's a day 2 pick, slam dunk.
Easily. All right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back shortly. And until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.